That's how it started in Canada. That's how it started in the United Kingdom. In the United Kingdom now, a tiny percentage of the population, fewer than 1 in 10, are able to afford private healthcare because the monolith, this huge leviathan of the NHS, has squeezed the alternative providers out of the market. There isn't a vibrant, competitive market of different providers. And so effectively what you have is an NHS where almost everybody relies on the government for whatever treatment they're lucky enough to get. And then a handful of very rich people can buy their way out. And almost always the buying out basically means buying a place at the front of a queue. So you turn up and you say, I need this operation. They say, come back next October. You then go private, and they will actually buy you the same operation in the same place, very often with the same surgeon, but it will be done privately. That's the reality of our two-tier health service. Listen to this, 1.4 million people work for the British NHS. It is the 3rd largest employer in the world. The largest is the Chinese Red Army. Second largest is the Indian National Railways. The 3rd largest is the National Health Service. And now let me tell you the really amazing thing. Of those 1.4 million people, the majority are managers. There are more bureaucrats in our system than there are doctors and nurses. And that's the unshiftable vested interest. When you have more administrative than medical staff, it is almost impossible with that block dispersed evenly across every constituency for a government seriously to begin even reforming the system, even introducing performance-related pay or internal markets, let alone moving towards a genuinely free market one. So don't imagine that this is an experiment that you can reverse if it doesn't work out. I'm afraid that isn't how experience in other countries suggests that it works. I'd like to leave some time for questions. I'm going to mention one other thing that's going on. One other way in which I think you're becoming a bit more European, and not in a good way. And that is this tendency towards declamatory legislation whose primary purpose is to show that the people voting for it are nice, rather than to effect a real outcome. And the outstanding example of recent weeks was the vote on cap and trade. Now, I envy people I envy people on both sides of this debate about climate change. Now, I see my friend Ian Stewart Murray, who speaks with utter authority, utter certainty on the subject, and then I hear the UN panel of climatologists, and they speak with equal authority and equal certainty. Look, I don't know. I don't know whether the world's getting hotter. I don't know if it's just the northern hemisphere. I don't know whether it's happening and it's not anthropogenic. I'm not qualified to say that, right? But I do know that it is absurd to spend this amount of money on a project which, even if you take the supporters of it at their most optimistic, is going to reduce temperature by 0.2 of 1 degree over the next 100 years, right? If the supporters of it are making a claim no more ambitious than that, what is the purpose of it? Of course, when you put that question to people, they say, well, it's to show that we care about it. Well, my friends, legislation should not be an instrument to send a message. Legislation should be used carefully and sparingly. What does the common prayer book say about marriage? It should be done soberly, reverently, and in fear of God, right? You should not be doing it wantonly or whatever. And that is a way in which the US is becoming dangerously European, where the function of lawmaking is seen as being proportionate to public outrage about something rather than proportionate to the need to get something done. And it's something that you haven't really gone in for in a big way in this country, but that we have seen an awful lot of. You pass a resolution against something and that's it. You then don't have to worry. And in fact, it is if you think about it, the ideal of the left, isn't it? If the motive is good, it doesn't really matter. I'm wearing the awareness ribbon or the wristband, so I don't actually need to give to the charity because everyone can see what a good guy I am. Right? Now, that is, when you see it in an individual, this tendency to be moralistic rather than moral, in other words, to care about having the right opinions about global corporations rather than actually living your life properly, it is disagreeable. When you see that principle elevated to a ruling principle of government, it is tyrannical. Again, go back to the vision of your founders. They would have been horrified at the idea of this profusion of legislation, these creations of bureaucracies, these extensions of government power for no other purpose than to prove to yourself that you're a nice person, and that when the issue arose, you were on the right side. Let me close by saying that all of these things, the response to the economic crisis, the nationalizations, the bailouts, the healthcare, all of these things serve to make America less American. I mean by that they serve to make your country more like the rest of the world, and in doing so, less prosperous, and less independent, and less free. When you were celebrating those tea parties on Independence Day, it seems to me that you were honouring not just the idea of independence in the sense of living in an autonomous state, but also the wider sense of independence of living as a sturdy, freestanding citizenry. People who live independently of the state as well as living within an independent state. People who look to themselves for solutions rather than expecting the government to solve all their problems. That surely is the fullest meaning of Independence Day and the demonstrations that marked the Tea Parties in support of it. That was the promise on which your country was founded, and it's a promise which the rest of the world has cause to be grateful for, because it drove your fathers not only to assure the success of liberty on this continent, but also to carry freedom to other continents. When Jefferson was writing before the Revolution began, he predicted with supreme confidence that there would be a huge migratory flow across the Atlantic to the United States, to America as it then was, but that there would be very few people making the return journey. That came spectacularly true in a way that even he couldn't have possibly forecast. But why did he think it was going to happen? Now, he was a patriot, all right, but not in any sense a sort of blood and soil nationalist. He didn't think that there was some peculiar property in the American skies, the American earth, the American gene pool that would make this country successful. He believed that the key to success was in the system of government that placed the maximum emphasis on the individual and circumscribed the role of government. And he was convinced that if other countries mimicked that form of government, they too would share in the success of the American model. And again, how spectacularly that came true. And that is why it worries me as a British politician who has seen the traditional birthright of the freeborn Briton diminished and lost, derided and traduced in his own country, but who's seen it still flourishing here. That's why it worries me so much when I see the same principles under attack in the country where, of all places, you would expect them to be secure. So let me end with a heartfelt imprecation from a British conservative who loves his country to American conservatives who still believe in theirs. Honour the vision of your founders. Respect the most sublime constitution devised by human intelligence. Never be afraid to speak to and for the soul of this nation, of which, by good fortune and God's grace, you are privileged to be part.